America is having an identity crisis. How many times have you heard that lately? It seems that phrase, I hear it everywhere. Every time I turn on the news or anything, I'm hearing somebody talk about America's identity crisis. And I think it's true. I think America is having an identity crisis, which is intentional and it has been planned. You know, the Russians always said that the way to take over America is by stealing her history. And that is happening. America doesn't know who she is anymore. Our students aren't being taught our true history. Children are wondering, oh, am I a male or a female? Boy, we've got an identity crisis exploding all around us, and we're going to have to get a grip on top of it. We are working on a documentary called America's Identity Crisis. And in the process, we're traveling around the country learning more and more about what's really going on in our country. And we're going to share some of that with you today in what we're calling the Storyteller's Journey. We'll be right back. Check out Heartstone Network, a place where you'll find featured documentaries, testimonials, and great teachings by many of your favorites. It's a place that we hope will encourage you in your walk with Christ. While there, check out this series we have with Mario Murillo called I Am Not Ashamed. It's a great look into his past and how Jesus has brought him to be the man that he is today. Check us out, heartstonenetwork.com. Well, we are back. I am Sondra Hartstone, and joining me is my co-host, Joshua Hicks. Josh is actually my son, and he's working with me here at Heartstone Network. Like I said in the opening, we are working on a documentary called America's Identity Crisis. It is taking us all over the country. The premise is it's the story of a young college graduate, Josh, who learned that he has been lied to in school and that he was told wrong information and lied about our history. He goes out to discover the truth, and then along the way, he decides to go find patriots that are trying to make a difference in their sphere of influence. And Josh, I have just been so pleasantly surprised at the amazing patriots around America that we are meeting and the things they're doing.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible. I mean, at this point, we've gone from one coast, we've gone up north, south. I think next we need to go west, right? Hit the west coast.
Yeah, we are.
We're just painting this whole country, seeing what people have in store and seeing what they're doing.
We were extremely excited we just got back last night from going to Detroit, Michigan, where we went to meet a young man named Justin Ford. Justin has an interesting story. He had a really tough childhood, been in and out of prison, dropped out of school, drugs, got a girl pregnant, all that kind of stuff. And he found Jesus and fell in love hard. He became a very committed Christian. So he started a program in schools, reaching out to kids, teaching them about the importance of having an integrity and of finishing and going to school. And we talked to some of the kids that he's been working with, and they all told us it's made a difference in their life, and their grades are going up. But Josh, before I move on to my next part of what I thought was just so moving about this trip, tell me your thoughts on what you saw this week.
I saw people that told us how they had suffered in the past and how they've overcome that, and how God has moved in their life to fix their heart and turn them into shakers and movers. And it was a very big highlight of what the devil thinks he's destroying. He's really not, because it's things that people that the devil tried to destroy. God turned around and said, okay, I know you went through this hardship, but we're going to use it for good now. I'm going to use it for good, for glory. And we're seeing people that are making a difference just from coming out of the ashes. Yeah.
I sometimes can get pretty discouraged with all of the news that comes out. And it's like, while we were gone, the first day I was in Montana before I was in Michigan. And I got that text saying that Montana was no longer going to allow transgenders to reach to the kids. And I was celebrating. And then, of course, the very next day, it was the thing that came out of
cross-dressers.
Yeah, and then it came out about Chick-fil-A, oh no, and then The Chosen, oh no, and then it's more stores, and it's just, you just feel bombarded and beat down with all of the negative. So to go out on the road and find out that there's unsung heroes all over this country who are quietly making a difference where they are, and that's what's going to take. It's going to take all of us working together to overcome the evil that's just being crammed down our throat. This man, Justin, he had no high school. He did not get a high school diploma, but yet he's built a successful real estate company. He's so honest. He's so transparent. And he's just so honest with the kids and tells them about the mistakes he's made. But I mean, tell you, that guy, the kids told us, he is always 100%. He is always positive. He's always encouraging. And you could just feel that from this guy.
Oh yeah. It just breathes off him as he was showing us Detroit, all these places that crazy things had happened to him in his past. I mean, he's just full of energy all day and he was passionate about everything. It seems one of the things I took away just from watching him as a man was that everything he was doing, everything he was talking about with us, he was passionate about. Even asking who my favorite singer was or what sports teams I liked. He just was full of passion about everything.
Yeah.
And that's something important for all of us to learn. If you're going to do something, have passion behind it. It was very cool lesson to learn.
Whoever has the most passion in the room wins. And that's true. People will follow passionate people. And he is a dynamic leader, a dynamic young man. And I say young, I mean, he's, I'm sure, early 40s, but, hey, to me, that's young, But, one thing that was interesting, Josh, you talked about, you were surprised because you've always heard, Detroit is like run down and burning and, right?
Yeah, no. So it's becoming more and more obvious everywhere I go, every time I travel, that media's lying to us, culture's lying to us, right? Been to Africa. Before I went, it was, it's a horrible place. It's all desolate desert. Everyone there is awful, blah, blah. Some of the best people I've met.
Oh, they're amazing
with
people.
the best hearts are in Africa, and it's not a desolate place. Like, that is Garden of Eden right there with some of the best people you've ever met.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
So
what did you think of Detroit? It wasn't the propaganda you've heard?
It wasn't propaganda I've heard. All this propaganda that everywhere's so dangerous and scary, that's just lies by the media.
I mean,
trying to keep you under their thumb. If you travel,
my father was a Chevrolet Cadillac dealership for all growing up, and so to see the GM headquarters with that rainbow flag waving outside right next to the U.S. flag did hurt me. It hurt.
Yeah.
But that's all over America. It hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, if people need to be that way, they can be that way. I just don't understand why we have to celebrate it. I also don't think we need to celebrate people that like to have affairs. I don't want to put up a flag that says, hey, cheat on your taxes. It's a great way to grow your income. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Bible's clear about calling out sin. And I'm not saying we need to beat anybody up. I'm just saying I don't need it in my face. And I don't understand why if one person gets offended at 2,000 conservatives, the one person that's not conservative, we have to do what they want. Well, I'm offended every single day. When I saw General Motors with that rainbow flag out front, I thought, man, I'm glad my dad didn't have to be here to see that. But, talking about Justin, let's just give the folks a taste of who this young man is. And you can look forward to seeing him in our documentary that will be coming out in early 2024 called America's Identity Crisis. So this is Justin Ford. And then after this, we want to tell you about something that I'm telling you, I sat there and cried during an interview I'm going to tell you about after this. So here's Justin.
And so when I went up to her, I said, I have a story to tell as well. And she said, how would you like to share your story in a local high school? And I said, I would absolutely love to do that. And so at 20 years old, she had taken me in a local high school and she introduced me as someone who had been through some things. And I had shared my story of the issues that I had experienced, the trouble that I had gone through, and why not to make those same decisions. And after that moment, I felt God's anointing on me as I was sharing my story. And this excitement on the inside of me took place where I need to share my story to young people. And so I started to travel with her to different high schools and share my story. And it was about a year later that she took another position somewhere else. And so rather than not sharing my story anymore, I actually took the initiative to start reaching out to high schools myself, sharing that I'd spoken with Mothers Against Drunk Driving in other schools. How would you like someone to come in and talk about peer pressure and making these decisions to your students? So sometimes they bring me in to, speak to specific classes. Sometimes they would make it a whole assembly. And I really just, had this desire and this passion to really, encourage young people to not go down that path.
Well, I think you can just see the love for Jesus that just pours out of this man. But Josh, let's talk about the interview that just, wow. knocked my teeth out. I bet it did your too. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Tell him.
We interviewed the deputy chief of police of a town up in Michigan. It's a man named Mike. And Mike has an incredible story. I was full of emotions during the whole thing. I could hear her as well. This guy's story is another one of these from the ashes rose a great man that God has risen up, right? I don't even know where to start. I mean, his crazy stuff in his childhood, didn't like police officers. He grows up, becomes a police officer, becomes the deputy chief of his police department, and is there affecting change because he saw some not so great things police officers did to his family many years ago. And he wanted to be a force for good to change that.
But he's in Detroit area, which
Detroit
is considered
area.
like one of the toughest police stations around.
Yeah.
And he wanted to retire or he wanted to be transferred to another department. They said, man, we can't lose you because you've got the best stats and everything else. This guy, how often do you hear a police officer just pour out their life about how much he loves Jesus? But what's so exciting is he wants to partner with Justin as well as the school superintendent. They are praying together and want to partner together to see that whole city and the suburbs and all the area around come to Jesus. I mean, nobody ever hears about that, about a police officer.
No, it's amazing. He was talking about he's having his officers go out, play basketball with the kids, or if a family needs meals, take them meals. He's from his position of authority where he can influence the culture of his officers and then the culture of the people that they serve. They're able to shine the light of Jesus to a community that desperately needs it, like we all do, right?
Yeah.
And so they're able to go in and be a light in a really dark place. And I definitely believe that they're making great changes there and bringing light to people and show them that there's more ways to live than just one.
Now, Justin, we ought to tell the people about Justin's book. You can get that on our network, heartstonenetwork.com. Josh, tell them about his book, because it really impacted you, you told me.
Yes, Justin Ford's book. It's called Unleashed. Phenomenal book. He goes through his life story in there. And then, after giving his life story, which is incredible to read where he started and where he is now, he talks about, in one of the many things he talks about giving life advice, is overcoming fear. He talked about how he used to be so afraid to fly on airplanes. Well, now he loves traveling. He said every time he felt a little bit of turbulence, he thought, oh no, I'm going to die. The plane's going to fall out of the sky, right? We all get that. Every time I fly, or before I read this, every time we hit turbulence, I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I'm sitting there praying, like, Lord, don't let it fall out of the sky, right? And while reading this, I made a brain connection there to history. During World War II, if you see any of these famous movies of the pilots flying, you see the bombers flying through incredibly turbulent air, fighter guns of their enemy coming in trying to shoot them down, and there's anti-aircraft cannons going on everywhere. If they could fly, I think I can fly on a little commercial airliner and be perfectly okay and not get hurt. So, I don't know. It helped me overcome that fear. And now while flying, doesn't really bother me too much. I'm like, we're fine. We're good. And that's just an example. But really what he talked about was not letting fear control your life. You can't let fear control your life. So you got to check out his book, Unleashed by Justin Ford. Absolutely life-changing.
You know, what I've noticed, Josh, is we've been going around doing these stories. A lot of these guys that are a little older than you, like, 40, I've noticed that they're really influencing you. Is that right?
I'd say so.
Like J.R. Fitch was a guy we met down in Tennessee. He really impacted you. And then I saw that with Justin and some of the other men. And I think that's very interesting because you have a great dad and you're very close with your father. So you're not a person that I would say needed a male role model in his life, because you had a very strong one. But it's still meaning a lot to you to interact with these guys.
Oh, yeah. I'm really focused on the whole concept around biblical masculinity, because everywhere around me, culture is trying to strip masculinity, especially from my generation. Here, even in school, you'd hear, oh, men are pigs, all men suck, men blow.
Oh,
And it
wow.
just drives me crazy. Not all men are bad. Men can be good. And seeing these men like this, seeing that there's more out there that have great lessons to teach me is absolutely amazing. And I just, everything they say, I'm soaking up. I want to know more about biblical masculinity and how to navigate in the world today and how to hold true to yourself and how to hold yourself to the standards that that your peers should be holding you to, and acting in the world in a way that honors God. And these men that are doing that, especially since they're closer to age, right?
Yeah.
I can see, okay, this guy's 40, maybe he's 50. Okay, I'm maybe 15, 25 years away from that, but they're having to navigate in the businesses that they have. They're having to interact with people every day, and they're doing it in a Christ-honoring way, and I'm paying attention to that, and I want to see how they do it, and I want to be like that too.
Wow. See, I never would have thought about, quote, biblical masculinity.
Oh, yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, I'm not sure where I learned the topic necessarily, probably at church or something. I've heard a sermon on it, but I know one thing that turned off church, and for a lot of people my age, turned off just the whole Jesus thing, right? Was that a lot of Christian men were pretty feminine.
What?
That's something me and some of my friends saw, I guess, when we were younger at church. There were some men that just came across as more feminine in a way. I don't know if we understood it. I don't know if I understand it now, but I remember having that perception in my head, whether it was true or not.
Interesting.
There was that perception. And like one of my friends, I know he doesn't want to go to church because he just thinks a lot of the men are weak and wimpy. Well, in church for a number of years, I think we've really moved away from this now, luckily, in most churches that I've seen. But in church for a number of years, masculinity wasn't really being taught or
and you thought being
catered
like women
to.
worshiping and everything was kind of girly.
Right. It kind of gave it this whole girly vibe to it, which I know now is like
Wow.
the opposite, because King David would just
yeah.
weep at the altar all day.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think it was the weeping while worshiping thing. It just, there was this weird stigma around it where Christian men were kind of wimpy. But think about King David, right?
Oh,
He
yeah.
had to have been tougher than nails on the outside and when navigating certain parts of life. That's what we need to get back to. That's how men need to operate, is being able to be tough and stand in truth, but also have that soft side where when God hits them, they're on the ground crying, or with their kids, they have a gentle hand and they're cool with them. But it's that certain type of toughness that can so quickly, without the Holy Spirit guiding it, can turn into like this Clint Eastwood going around being a menace to society, like like in a Western, right? One of the bad guys. It can so quickly develop into that. But with the Holy Spirit guiding your masculinity, I mean, you can be one tough dude, but also be
Okay, so what is
tender-hearted.
it? Tell me what it looks like. What is biblical masculinity or whatever? What is that?
Biblical masculinity, standing up for truth when truth needs to be stood up for,
Okay.
not backing down. But it also means spending time in the Word, praying, not being afraid to expose your heart to your wife, right? Being able, or even with a group of men, understanding that maybe you have a community group where y'all talk about God together, being able to get vulnerable when it's appropriate, but making sure you're not wearing your emotions on your sleeve all the time where it's inappropriate. There's a fine line and a balance to this that people have to find. I'm navigating it. I'm learning it. And
Wow, I like being a girl. I could just put my feelings wherever I want.
next up on the Sondra Hartstone show, biblical femininity.
Okay, so you're a newlywed.
Yeah,
Do you and your wife talk about God, faith, and all that stuff at home privately?
we do. We
Really?
do. Yeah, we'll go to community group afterwards. We'll kind of talk about what was talked about there, or say, she's praying and God tells her something. She'll bring it to me and say, hey, God told me this. Like, what do you think it means? How this is how I felt when it happened. What do you think that feeling means? And vice versa. We'll talk about these things together, and say we get into like a disagreement over something. Well, once we cool off, we'll talk about it. We'll be like, okay, what happened? Why did we get this way? Talking about conflict resolution to make sure like we're setting ourselves up for success, so we're not falling into some kind of trap.
Well, Josh, I'd say if you weren't married, there'd be people wanting to know if you could get married. Wow, there's a lot of women would like a husband like that.
Well, biblical masculinity. That's what needs to be on the radar. If you want to be able to be a good husband, a good, not a dad yet, but hopefully will be someday, right? If you want to.
Yes, Grandma here says, yes, please. Yes, yes, yes.
You're just sitting here checking the
okay.
time,
yeah,
huh?
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Also just making sure you're navigating the world properly and standing up for the right values.
Josh, you're giving me hope for your generation.
There's hope. There's a lot more.
Are there other guys your age like you?
Oh, even better than me.
Really?
There's plenty out there. What I always say, especially to older people, like when I'm at a conference that are just sitting there, oh, the country's going to hell in a handbasket. It's over. I'm like, no. All these young people that you see crying on the internet that have purple hair and waving their rainbow flag, yes, there's a lot of them. But the people who are rooted in truth, who are working to make themselves better, who are working hard at their career and their job to shape culture later down the road, they're all too busy working to deal with all this drama or to want to get involved in it. So there's plenty of us out there that are preparing ourselves, making a difference maybe in the small area we're at, but we're not on TikTok screaming. We're not the people going to city council meetings screaming for our 3 minutes of discussion. We've all seen clips of that, right? So there's good-minded people. Now, the biblical literacy of my generation, and really probably most Americans alive, right? It's very high number, aren't very biblically literate.
Literate or illiterate?
They're not biblically literate.
Oh, not literate.
So like people that will be like, oh yeah, the Bible is good, but I don't agree with.
They're just going by what they've heard. They never read it for themselves.
Right.
Well, honey, that's all generations.
That's about everyone. So my generation does need to get better with their biblical literacy if we want to be good leaders someday. If you want to be a leader someday, you need to understand your Bible. You need biblical literacy. You need to learn it. Get what is it, the books that you can buy that come with it, like commentary?
Yes.
They call it commentary to kind of help you break down what it means.
Yeah.
That's good. The Christian Study Bible has it built in. I like that one. You read a verse, then you go and it dissects it, and you can learn a little more, get into more of the meat and potatoes of it. So there's all these different tools. And study.
So here's my question for you. Who raised you? You just kind of I know I raised you, but I wish I could take credit for you, but I think you kind of learned this stuff on your own, man. Wow. Ever since you were a little bitty guy, though, it was just between you and God. So God raised you. I just watched. Wow. We got to take a break, but we're going to be right back and learn some more cool stuff. See you in a minute.
Have you ever wanted to know what your redemptive gift is? Do you have any idea what a redemptive gift is? Well, I have a teaching called Unlocking Your Redemptive Gift that tells you all about it. It's taken from Romans 12, the 7 gifts that are listed there, which is prophet, servant, teacher, exhorter, giver, ruler, and mercy. And within this teaching, you will find out how God designed you. The Father designed you the way you think. There's motivations that you have. There's strongholds and weaknesses that you can overcome. It is a great way to discover who you are and find the purposes that God has for you. And you will find it on Heartstone Network. And it's called Unlocking Your Redemptive Gifts with Darla Ryden. Hope to see you there.
And we are back.
Yep, we're here. I didn't go anywhere.
Me neither.
I didn't even get coffee.
Oh, man, I needed coffee.
I need it. All this traveling we're doing on the road. I'm gone. We're gone almost the whole month. We're only home on weekends and just a couple of days. And being a newlywed, I don't know how your wife's handling all that. Is she?
It's tough. It's difficult. We talk about it, and
I asked her how she felt about it. She said, as long as he's doing what God called him to do, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
I went, man, you married a good girl, Josh.
Hey, we just, we'll hire her on here, right? Hire her on here someday and she can just travel with us. That sounds more fun to me, right?
Yeah, y'all travel and I'll stay home and y'all phone it in.
There we go. Yeah, we'll FaceTime her when we're setting up the shoot,
Yeah,
right?
looks good to me.
FaceTime the
Yeah.
director in. Yeah.
So listen, I'm really interested by what you were saying before the break. So
Yes.
tell us some more.
So a great resource I've found for studying this biblical masculinity as well is the Founding Fathers. And a lot of men, really up until, I'm not saying it ended at the beginning of the 20th century, but this is just kind of the period of time I like, is men from the founding generation up through like the Civil War era. A lot of these guys were very biblically literate. They were tuned into God, and they understood biblical masculinity, especially for their time.
I doubt if anybody ever called George Washington limp. Wimpy.
Yeah.
That man was not wimpy.
Yeah, I'd be afraid to call him that. Who knows how you'd
Or
respond
Abraham
to-
Lincoln.
Yeah, and George Washington, this big lie that they taught in school that drives me up the wall is that, George Washington was a deist because he used certain words to talk about God that really only deists used, right? Which it was after a big Reformation and
Yeah.
everything. So, yes, he would use words like, I can't even think of them off the top of my head, like
sovereign or
sovereign, the all-knowing one, things, probably butchering it, but things like this, right?
yeah, that could have been culture at the time too.
It was culture at the time.
Yeah.
These pieces are taken out of context, and it's like, no, that is how George Washington was intimately describing God.
Yeah.
He was using more than just words of God, Yahweh, or Lord. He was using words that were more intimate and fitting, like how in Hebrew there's so many different names for God. That's what George Washington was doing.
And if you go back to the writings from that time, there's people that were very close with him. And all of these writings, they all say, oh yeah, he was very, very Christian. He was very focused on his faith. He was all about it. And so that's what his friends wrote as well.
Yeah, and his family. And that lie is pervaded to where...
Where all these statues of him praying come from?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And perpetuating the lie that he was a deist helps the feminizing of men, which is obviously one sect of society wants to feminize all of us.
Yeah.
If they can change the history to where these great masculine men of God, they can change some of that narrative around them and make them seem lower than they were, it's a lot easier to strip people's identity away. America's identity crisis. Get ready. It's going to be big. Anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, there's all these men. Thomas Jefferson, they said he did some crazy stuff, and Ben Franklin as well. I think they just didn't really like how all the denominations fought. The denominations would fight amongst each other really bad in the late 18th century.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of this...
Oh, well, we don't do that now.
Right.
We just have church splits.
So, yeah, that's kind of where this lie is pervaded, that they were deists. But if you study them and how they were and their writings, especially on theology, you can tell they were great men of God. So learn from them. Why can't we learn from them? Human nature is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Well, here's part of the problem with people reading about that, because if we've talked about before, and this is also part of our story, there was a plan around the turn of the century in 1900 to take America over by the socialists. And they knew that America was so strong that it was going to take a long time. And so they came up with the plan to do it through education. And it's called the dumbing down of America. So what they did is they started taking phonics out of school and replacing it with whole language or look-say, or that's where you have to memorize words instead of learning how to sound them out. And what happens is you only have a limited vocabulary of them and a limited amount of words you can read. So it makes it not fun to read. And so now, what is it, like 8% or something of Americans or whatever read?
Right. It's
for
something
fun.
It's something like 8% of Americans aged like 21 to 35, give or take, kind of like Gen Z, millennial, kind of where it blends together.
Read for entertainment.
It's like 8% will read one book this year, cover to cover.
Yeah, you see, and what this does is this kind of inhibits critical thinking. It keeps you from expanding your mind and learning and growing. And I think ultimately what it does is it stops people from pursuing their destiny, and it cripples their own brilliance, so that we have a whole generation and on that's not achieving their best, that's not becoming all that God meant them to be. And this way, it's forming a socialist view in people. And so we're all just going to keep moving like sheep to become like they want us to be. It's my generation and older knows what America was like, and we weren't taught all these things. And that's why I guess it's so hard for us. And I probably, most people I know my age who feel like we do conservative, part of us grieves every day. I do. Part of me is in a grieving process all the time. And I'm not trying to say I don't have faith. I do believe in God, and I believe in prayer, and I believe in the hand of God. But I also know that God is a gentleman, and he's just not going to knock people over, and we do have to keep praying, and we have to believe, but I think we have to keep our eyes on the kingdom of God, because I don't know what's going to happen with America, and I'm sad because I don't know what America's going to be like, Josh, when you're my age, and I don't know what kind of country we were leaving for our grandchildren, and it makes me very sad, and I don't know if it's right for me to feel that way or not, but I am. I'm sad. I could cry about it all the time. It's like COVID came, and it was like they pushed the button, the Great Reset. Of course, I wondered if COVID came at the time it did because they wanted to knock the legs out from under Trump's presidency, because we had such a great economy. And I mean, I told my husband this morning, your dad, I said, you got to wonder if maybe Trump is the answer, or why do they hate him? I have never seen anybody work in the government hated as bad as that man. They hate that man with the passion. And it's like, I said, they don't just hate him that much because his personality bugs them. He was doing something. He was either exposing darkness or cleaning out the swamp. I don't know what all he was doing, but makes you wonder if he was really doing something to hurt evil, because evil hates him so bad.
Remember, when we were riding around with Justin in Detroit, he had a really good point here. He said, yeah, the swamp was drained. All the water was drained from the swamp, and all the vile creatures were shown. And as they emerged from the mud, they started shrieking and trying to scramble, right?
Yeah, I don't think all of the swamp was drained, but something has been exposed, and that's what's got them all inflamed. It's a painful time. It is a painful time. But the reason we're doing the documentary America's Identity Crisis is because I want to show you the many, many patriots around this country that are standing up and walking in their destiny, and they're making a difference in the lives of young people. There are people making a difference in education and government. There's just people fighting everywhere, and I've been greatly encouraged because these are patriots that are willing to lay it all down and do whatever they've got to do, and it's costing them, and they're doing it gladly. I just see I see something happening, and I see Christians have sat by complacent for a long time, and I see that things have gotten so bad now. Christians are standing up, and they're getting tough, and they're saying no more, not on my watch. That's why when it came out about The Chosen hanging the LGBTQ plus the pride flag, whatever it's called, that's why people got so mad and said we have to boycott this show. And I thought, wow, I hate to boycott the show, but I will say this. I don't know if I will or not, but I will say that I do believe it's going to hurt donations, because it's conservatives and it's Christians that love Jesus that have been supporting that show. It's all completely donor funded. So we'll wait and see if this is going to, hurt. I mean, they've raised so many millions of dollars. They'll keep going, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know what the effect will be on them in the long run. I couldn't tell you. Hopefully they kind of realize the mistake, or hopefully they fully realize the mistake that was made and realize, okay, hey guys, this isn't appropriate on the set.
And I think it's fine, Josh, that they hire people of different faiths.
I think it's awesome.
It is. It exposes them to the gospel. But number two, you can't make a film production of that size with just Christian filmmakers, or you won't get it done. There's just not enough of us. But to endorse that behavior is a different thing. But see, there was a documentary made over 20 years ago, and I may have talked about this last week, where when it was illegal to be homosexual, let alone get married, the left side made a documentary to play in schools, and they distributed it all across American schools, where a man who was obviously homosexual teaching 5, 6-year-old kids stood up and he said, you know, in America, it's legal. A man and a woman can get married, but did you know it's against the law for a man that loves a man to get married, or a woman that loves a woman to get married? That doesn't seem fair, does it? That doesn't seem right. And the little 5 and 6-year-old kids would go, yeah, that's not fair. And he would go on and on. It was changing their mind and brainwashing them. And of course, parents didn't know this was going on in school. You can bet I didn't know it was going on. And so now what happened? Those kids were taught that all through school, and now they're the 30 and 40-year-olds making public policy. So they're going, yes, it's fair. This is what we got to do. See what I mean? These people were smart. We were asleep at the wheel, and they started many years ago destroying this country. They started over 100 years ago.
It just takes time. That's what they're doing now. In order to counter this, to fight this, we got to lay the seeds. Yes, we need to be loud now, but we also have to lay the seeds, especially with the next generation, to fight it, which I do believe is happening, and we need to do more of it. The same tactics they used, we need to do it, but better. Our children, okay, if the public education system has become so corrupted, that's what they're going to teach. You got to figure out how to homeschool, put them in co-ops or smaller schools where you can actually have a say in the narrative being taught.
Yeah.
And plant the seeds in them that need to happen, so that way when they're 18, 19 years old, they have a good worldview, and they know who Jesus is, and they know who they are.
I think that's a biblical worldview.
That's a biblical worldview.
I don't know, Josh. What do you think that your generation is going to do to bring America back? Or are they?
I don't know. I'm not sure what we're going to do. We have a lot of people who fall on the side that wants to ruin this country and destroy it. There's some people on...
Do you think this socialist worldview has been indoctrinated into your age bracket?
Even my friends that would fall under the umbrella of conservative will have points that is very socialistic and wrong. One thing that's very sad to me is friends of mine in college, this was years back when I was, university, the topic of religion gets brought up while we're all sitting around by a campfire. And two of the guys start stating their worldview and their view on religion, and especially their view on Christianity. And I almost threw up because of what I've, maybe culturally.
Okay.
I think they were raised like Catholic, but didn't really fall in with it at the time. It was disgusting because what they quoted as their view on religion, their view on Christianity in particular, was quoted directly from the TV show South Park. And you probably don't know much about South Park. Is it a
cartoon?
It's a cartoon for adults. It's a satirical show that kind of makes fun of all kind of things in culture, but it's very dark. There's a lot of demonic overtones and undertones in it.
Wow. And
they did an episode about like the Catholic Church, and it was very offensive and disgusting. And I kind of watched it I was disgusted by it, but I needed to see the bullets that were being shot at my friends.
Okay.
So I watched it. Well, when these guys talked about their religious views, I'm not kidding, they almost verbatim quoted South Park, a very demonically possessed show.
Oh, wow.
And I rebuked them for it, and I played the clip back, and I said, this is really where y'all are getting y'all's view on the world and religion from this show right here. It caused a big blow up. We were shouting at each other about it. It got really intense, and I was telling them how wrong they were, and I think they got it. I think they heard it. I've talked to them recently. I think their heads are getting more on straight about it. So luckily that's because I was able to stand up and talk to them about it. I think that helped improve their worldview. But it makes me worried about how many people in my generation, how many minds have been corrupted by Family Guy, South Park, all these really demonic shows. How much has that pervaded their brains? Because it used to be people learn from stories from the older generations. Then we had the written word. People learn from books. Now we're learning through TV. And when kids are plopped in front of the TV all the time, that's where they're learning. That's where they're figuring out who they
Well,
are
now
or their
kids don't watch
worldview.
TV. They sit around watching TikTok for 2 or 3 hours when they come home from work or get out of school. They're watching TikTok, which was started by China. I think they knew what they were doing, and there is filth on TikTok. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but it's, that's really where we're at as a society. Your generation, they're not reading books. They're watching TikTok. Lord help me.
Yeah, you get a 30-second to 3 minutes of someone rambling. You don't get the full picture. You get snippets of the news. You don't actually see the full thing. It's just like headlines, right? The headlines get your energy up, get you upset, but you don't really know what it is. But what terrifies me is that these content creators that put out their point of view on Christianity without knowing who Jesus is or really understanding the Bible at all, people who are in the same camp, maybe they're just kind of searching. They come across a video of someone talking about the awfulness of Christianity and, oh, the Bible says this and this.
Because, the socialist agenda is to get rid of God,
Oh,
to
yeah.
get God out of America.
I was watching a movie yesterday. What did I tell you it was? It was the
7 years in
7
Tibet?
years in Tibet.
With Brad Pitt.
With Brad Pitt. And when Brad Pitt spends all this time in Tibet in this monastery where the Dalai Lama is, and the Chinese, this happened in history, the Chinese took over Tibet. Well, in this point in the movie where they bring the Chinese generals in, they come in, they completely disrespect this people. I may not agree with their religion and what they're worshiping, but as human beings, they deserve respect because they're human beings.
Yes.
The Chinese generals walk in all angry and, just jerks. And they walk in, they destroy some of the stuff in their temple. And then there's this big discussion. And as the generals are walking out, one of the monks says something to the generals. And the general turns and says this to the monk. He goes, "Religion is poison." And then walks away. And I'm like, if that doesn't fully encompass what the Chinese Communist Party is, I don't know what does.
Wow.
And if the communists have invaded our country all these years ago, like we've talked about on this show numerous times, and that ideology has just progressed and progressed and progressed. Think about where we're at now. How many people in my generation share that idea that any religion at all is poison?
Yeah. Well, organized religion, seeker-friendly churches and that stuff has really turned people off. And I was told, I think Justin told me that the fastest growing churches in America are the ones that are saying it like it is, speaking the truth. And they're not trying to be seeker-friendly. They're just trying to tell people the truth and be straight. And I found that very encouraging. Because people that are really sold out to Christ, so many are like leaving the church because if they're not having authentic experiences, they're not interested. I think we're at such a time in society where people need authentic encounters with God. They need authentic encounters with one another. It's just a different time. We are at a rubber meets the road time in history, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, think about this. Even people who may not have really ever been to church, say they decide one day they want to start going to church. Think about it in this. Think about it as this parable. You have a man that's hungry, and he's going around asking for food, trying to get food, and you give him a little pack of those saltine crackers you get at the seafood restaurant. That may kind of fill his hunger a little bit, kind of may hold him over for a minute, but he's not going to be full. How's he going to get full off that? But if you find this man and you sit him down and give him a steak and potatoes and green beans and a dinner roll, he's going to be full. He's going to have energy. He's going to be energized in the way that he needs energy. It's the same thing here.
What, church?
Church. Feeding people spiritually. If you're seeker-friendly, handing them
anemic.
saltine crackers,
you're anemic.
you're going to starve. But if your church is actually feeding people, they're going to be able to grow stronger and get healthier. And, the steak, the potatoes, the green beans, these are all different aspects of a healthy church, right? Yes, Sundays, your preacher's standing up there talking about things that need to be addressed, giving a good, encouraging message that is designed to point people to go study the word on their own and go pray on their own. That's what a preacher needs to do, is just kind of encourage people to do that. They have community groups set up where you can go join other groups of people, maybe various age ranges or within your age range, to learn from each other and be accountable to each other. Community is being just destroyed in this day and age. People aren't communicating or communing with each other, having communion together. Like, used to have bowling leagues and Lions clubs, all these kind of things. Well, we don't have that. We have the internet. So setting up work programs so people can get together, and also just having supplemental teaching, places to take your kids that are safe to help them learn as well. So a good church has all those.
Wow. Well, Josh, if you weren't my son, I would adopt you. I think you're pretty amazing. Wow, I had no idea you were so smart. I'm teasing.
It's because I read books.
Yeah, it's because you are with the program. You are very learned. Well, that's all the time we have today. I do thank you for joining us today on the Sondra Hartstone Show. I hope you're enjoying the storyteller's journey, and we'll be back next week with some more stories hot off the trail. Until then, be safe.